banking relationship. That is the enormous power that rests in banking. But it is to be expected because the world is a world of global trade and global movement. And therefore, the lifeblood, the free way to facilitate those global movements is the global payment systems. That's what makes it possible for persons to do business online, for you to do a transaction and click pay by PayPal and expect that that payment will arrive in Jamaica, in London, or wherever in the world. It's those correspondent banking relationships that make it happen. And so this removal of the service created tremendous difficulty. But it's not only happening in Cayman Islands. And this speaks to the enormous power of the United States, which is a good thing when properly used, because the United States represents the center of commerce globally. It is one of the international reserve currencies. And therefore, our business in the United Kingdom is also suffering, where large banks like Barclays have said, you know, we're not going to bank you anymore because we are afraid of losing our own correspondent banking relationships here. And so today, having had a relationship with Barclays for well over a quarter century, Barclays has decided that come October, they are going to close their account with us. Granted, the discussions we've been having in the Caribbean space, which have percolated through to the internet, has caused a softening, because every single month I meet with the managing director in Barclays by telephone, or when I'm in the UK, I visit him personally, as we gradually sever the relationship. It's one of those divorces that we're carefully considering how it's done so that we can be friends afterwards. Right. And he said that next month, in fact this month, Barclays will be attending the IMF meeting, and they're thinking about ways in which we may be able to continue to provide a service. But the effect of it starts here. Mm-hmm. I've met with the Trade and Commerce in the UK and others to discuss the issues. And it all centers back here in the United States in terms of persons ensuring that there is correspondent banking. And so these are some of the real risks that we suffer. And I see Terry standing beside me, and that's not because she loves me that much. But I close by simply saying that the solutions are for us to work together, for us to lend voice to the matter. Within the Caribbean, CARICOM has established a task force to lead on this matter. They have appointed Prime Minister Gaston Brown of Antigua as the lead person in this regard. We have put together a website, which you see here, called CaribbeanDayRisking.com, where some 36 articles and scholarly pieces have been done, which sets out the issues, and which I invite you to visit this site to see all of those studies that speak to the issue. They're all here, including the IMF study and many others. We have also sought to have all our leaders speak on the issue throughout the region. We are seeking to strengthen central bank regulations. We are doing all that we can, but at the end of the day, it's a political issue which must be solved here. I close with the words of one of your former presidents, Ronald Reagan, who some argued helped to change the outcome of the Cold War. But he said to Mr. Gorbachev once, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And I say to us here today that the construction of a wall which is promised will be no worse than the wall that has been created by this correspondent banking crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow, thank you so much, General Manager. That was a lot of information as far as assessing the correspondent banking problem. So to recap a little bit, the family and the business ties are at risk. So there's a political issue, and it's disproportionately a part of the Caribbean. And so we're looking at what they're doing in the Cayman Islands, trying to find a solution, trying to make sure that the money transfers and all of the other things that are financially necessary to move the Caribbean are still in place. And General Manager Errol Garrett so eloquently put it that we're all one. We're all part of one home. So, you know, the bedroom can definitely be in New York, and it can also be a bedroom in Barbados or Haiti, and it can also be a living room in Belize, and of course, the dining room has to be in Kingston, Jamaica. And so he also talked about, we talked about assessing the risk. He also talks about security, which is really important because as I'm looking at the issues and we're looking at why they're saying that it's important to de-risk, we're looking at the security. So we're looking at the border security, which you mentioned. We're looking at foreign accounts being used by drug traffickers and tourists. And terrorists. And we're looking at shell companies hiding ownership. But he also came back and he talked to us a little bit about, we're assessing these risks, but we're also finding solutions. And so clarifying these regulations and these guidelines, understanding the intended use and purposes of why it's important to use correspondent banking. And just for a point of clarity, how many of us in the room actually have transferred money? Anybody? Right. How many of us have used PayPal? Anybody? Shopped on Amazon? Right. And so this is how important it is for us to understand this issue of correspondent banking and understand it's across the board. It's not just a Caribbean issue. It's an issue, and it's an issue that we're trying to figure out how to resolve it together collectively, the U.S. and the Caribbean. And on that note, I'm going to bring the Ambassador Ronald Sanders forward. Ambassador Sanders is extraordinary. And he is the United States, an Organization of American States for Antigua and Barbuda. Before taking up his appointment, he was a senior research fellow at the Institute of the Commonwealth Studies, the University of London in the UK, and a senior fellow at Massey College, the University of Toronto. He was also an international business consultant and writer, and so he's written about some of these issues and he understands what it means to do business. From January to April of 2016, he served as the president of the Permanent Council of the 34-member organization American States, where he initiated an action to recover the organization from severe financial difficulties. And I stand here today to say that we will continue to have financial difficulties until we take this issue by the hand and make sure that there is clarity in our regulations, to make sure that everyone understands that this is a problem for the Caribbean, but it's a collective problem that we can look at, and we can look at it without putting our security at risk. We can look at it from the standpoint of there is innovation and technology in place that can address a lot of the issues and concerns that are being brought forth. And so collectively, we can do that together, and that's the only way. And our general manager alluded to it, we're all one house. And so that's the only way we can do it collectively. So I'm going to bring forward our ambassador, Ronald Sanders. You can speak anywhere you want to. If you want to speak at it, you may.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you all very much for coming here this morning. Thank you to Congresswoman Clark for organizing this meeting. I thank you all particularly for a very good reason. There's no congressperson in this room except for Yvette Clark. What does that tell you about what they care about the Caribbean? Not very much. And believe me, I've been an ambassador here now for a year. And the experience of no congressperson other than Yvette Clark in this room is the experience I've had for 1 year of existence in this place. It tells me that Congress people really don't care about the Caribbean. To them, we are a statistic. We exist. Our numbers are small. We are marginal to anybody's interest. It therefore doesn't matter whether we live or die. And that's a fact. To get their attention to anything, it has to be something they are concerned about. So I get called by a senator from the Congress to come and speak to him about U.S.-Caribbean relations, expecting that one of the key issues that I would be talking with him about is what you've heard about this morning, correspondent banking relations and the effect that this de-risking has on the very lives of people. Instead of that, what does he want to talk to me about? The United States and Venezuela. As if we have a penny in that dollar. And then he wants to criticize us for taking a position that is not critical of the Venezuelan government. And why does he want us to criticize the Venezuelan government? Look, in 2008, when the financial crisis started in this country, and it started in this country, created by big banks in this country, it affected little people whose jobs were put at risk, and the country went into recession. It was very difficult for a lot of people, but it didn't stop here. Its ripple effect went throughout the world, and it went into the Caribbean as well. Your economy went into recession, ours went into double recession because ours are much smaller. But the reality is that at that time, when our economies were facing collapse, and I mean that, collapse, the only country that came to our assistance was Venezuela. They provided us with oil, which the price of which was $150 a barrel at that time. If we did not get concessional arrangements from Venezuela, we would not have been able to survive, not a single one of our economies. And in helping us to survive, the Venezuelans helped the United States of America too. Now you may wonder why I'm saying that. Well, here's the reality. If our economies collapse and poverty increases and unemployment increases, where do our people run to? Here. And they come here as best they can, illegally, by refugees, whatever they can. But it increases the United States' problem. And the poorer we get, the more vulnerable we become to what Minister Errington was talking about earlier today. And that is the movement of drugs through the Caribbean. We don't produce it, it comes through the Caribbean. Who buys it? Bought here. This is where it's consumed, this is where the market is, this is where the demand is, passes through us, but we get blamed for it. And getting blamed for it, we get punished for it too, even though we neither make it nor consume it. But that's the reality of our situation. So we have a big problem in the Caribbean. Our problem is, how do we get the attention of the United States government to this real issue of correspondent banking relations, which incidentally we did not create. They talk about the weakness of money laundering and anti- and counter-terrorism financing regimes in our countries. The truth is, our anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing regimes are stronger than they are in the United States of America. There is not one incident of any major money laundering or or terrorism offense by any bank in the world that comes from the Caribbean. Not one. Now, if we have not had one, not a single incident of that kind, anywhere in the Caribbean, could you tell me how we can become a major risk for money laundering and counterterrorism financing? How is that possible? When every one of these instances have either taken place here in the United States or in Europe. Didn't happen in the Caribbean. Incidentally, on the money laundering standards, my country, small though it is more compliant with money laundering requirements as measured by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is a club to which the United States belongs. We don't belong to it, but they measure it, and we are in greater compliance than the United States of America. Yet, it has been dreamed up that because of money laundering and counterterrorism financing risks, banks that offer us correspondent relations have been urged not to do so because of the risk that there would be money laundering from our countries. Understand what I'm saying? That's the reason this is happening. The regulatory bodies here, the Federal Reserve Board and the Office of the Controller of Currency, have told these banks, if there is any risk of money laundering that you face, there will be a price to pay. And the sums that you are going to be penalized are going to be enormous. So these banks look around the world to see who they give correspondent relationships to. Look at us in the Caribbean, where constantly American senators and congressmen are saying we're tax havens, without being able to prove it, incidentally, but we are tax havens. The biggest tax haven in the world is called Delaware. It's not in the Caribbean. It's here. The greatest acts of money laundering take place in Miami. That's Miami, Florida, United States of America. Not anywhere in the Caribbean. Second greatest place of money laundering, New York. We don't have a place called New York in the Caribbean. But these are the realities. Yet when we raise it with the US government, first time I raised it in the State Department, this business of correspondent banking relations, which is probably about 11 months ago now, the official told me that they didn't understand what it was all about. Well, I had to admit that maybe they were brighter than me. That whatever university they went to trained them not to understand things that seemed pretty simple, the way I looked at it. But in any event, the reality is that's the wall we are up against. And the wall is that the United States government has taken a position that our countries are tax havens and there's money laundering and even though there is not one case of it, not a single one, but therefore we pose a risk. The banks, therefore, are saying, if you are going to penalize me, you, the US authorities, are going to penalize me for any one of these infractions that might take place, I'm not risking it. And the Caribbean is too small for me to bother. But here's the reality of what the implications of that are. You know, these things never come home to us until they hit us personally. When they hit us personally, we understand them better. Last week, a cousin of mine, 4 months younger than I am, went on holiday with his wife to the Dominican Republic. And after dinner one night in their hotel room, they were listening to music in the corridor, in the foyer, and he dropped down dead. Instantly. Had a major hemorrhage to his brain. For 2 weeks, his body was left in the Dominican Republic. His family anxious about what to do. Now, eventually, his body was got from the Dominican Republic, and his wife and his family were able to bury him and put closure to that. But here's the reality of what I'm trying to tell you. If the correspondent banking relationship with the bank in the Dominican Republic that my cousin's family had to pay to take his body back home, it wouldn't have happened. Somehow they would have got to go there to bury him in a strange country. Last week, we had a fire in Antigua. Little boy, 4 years old, got very badly burned. We needed to send him out to a hospital in Miami to be treated for severe burns. If we could not pay a bank through a correspondent banking relationship to send him, God knows what would have happened. But he's 4 years old. Mother with cancer. Needs to get urgent treatment. The money is raised by the Rotary Club and the Lions Club in Antigua and by the government to get her airshipped out. She didn't make it. But if there were not correspondent banking relations, she wouldn't have gone anyhow. This is what correspondent banking relationship means at a personal level. At a wider level, it means much more than that. If we cannot, the country we trade with most, incidentally, we in the Caribbean, is this one. Almost 60% of our trade on a bilateral level is with the United States. Everything we buy here employs somebody because that thing has to be made here, has to be made by people. So we are helping to employ people. Of the balance of trade surplus, incidentally, between the Caribbean and the United States is entirely in the United States' favor. Billions of dollars a year comes from our little islands to this place. Now, there's something wrong here. There's something desperately wrong here. The fact that congressmen don't turn up to listen to this stuff, I must tell you, is for me a matter of great worry and great concern. And I don't know what else we have to do to get them to begin to understand this issue. It is why I am so grateful that every one of you who have come here this morning, from whatever it is you were doing, you decided to come here to listen to this. And the fact that you have done so is something for which I, on behalf of my government, my people, my country, I'm extremely grateful. And I would like to ask you, as everybody else has done here today, to see what you can do to mobilize this place to be more attentive to this issue. The lives of people are at stake. And you know, if this continues as it is now, the consequences will not be good. Here's what will happen. If we can't pay for the trade we do with the United States of America, guess what? We'll have to trade with somebody else. That means trade diversion will happen. Trade will move from the United States and it will move to China, which already has a foothold in our region. And why do they have a foothold? For the last 14 years, how much aid do you think the United States gave my country in the Caribbean? 14 years. What do you think that aid would have been? Somebody guess, any figure? Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was $8 million in 14 years. And during those 14 years that the American government gave my country $8 million in aid, most of which, incidentally, was for the military to fight drug trafficking. In other words, it was for the United States' benefit. But during that period in which $8 million was given to us, the United States made over $4 billion in trade surplus from our little island. Incidentally, that's only one of the imbalances of the relationship. But the point I am trying to make to you is the Caribbean is a neglected area. But if this correspondent banking relationship worsens, there will not only be trade diversion, remittances that you send now to your families in the Caribbean that won't be able to get there. You'll find some other way of doing it. It'll go underground. And when it goes underground, it's not regulated. And just as you will find ways of getting money to your family because you need to, the guys who are crooks, criminals, who will now not be able to use the banking system where they can be traced and caught, will also find ways of doing it. And then the very thing they are trying to stop, the money laundering and the counterterrorism financing, will happen. Because the regimes we have put in place cannot cater for illegality. So, again, I thank you all very much for coming, and I hope that you have found the presentations made here today useful. You have, however, to get your congressmen to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you once again, Ambassador Ronald Sanders. So just a little bit of a recap. So we talked about the importance of corresponding banking. Now, we talked about how the Caribbean matters. We also talked about the personal level of how correspondent banking matters, and now we're talking about it as the Caribbean countries and how it matters with the 4-year-old boy needing to get to the hospital, or with a mother with cancer needing to get to care, or the death of a loved one outside of the United States. Those are all things that are very, very important to us. But more importantly, we talked about how to get Congress involved and how to get your voice heard. And first of all, I want to commend Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke for actually taking the time to have this very important issue be front and center stage at the Congressional Black Caucus, because that's how you get Congress involved. The other way to get Congress involved is each one of you have a voice. And as you listen to the issues today, and I'm getting ready to open it up for questions and answers, take that information back to your municipality, back to your state, back to your country, and have your voice heard in a conversation as well. Let me give you an example. My office, the Office of Advocacy, we look at regulatory concerns. The SEC came out with 500 pages of rules as it related to crowdfunding. Anybody in here familiar with crowdfunding? As it related to crowdfunding. I don't know about you, but myself and the small businesses in Region 2 weren't too savvy on reading 500 pages of rules. However, our economists and our lawyers at the Office of Advocacy under the leadership of Chief Counsel Darryl DePriest, they did read those 500 pages of rules. And then what did we do? As regional advocates, we took it to the streets. So what do I mean by that? We actually had town hall meetings, we had round tables, we had conversations with our elected officials and our business stakeholders. We talked to the angels, we talked to the VCs, we talked to the small businesses. And then all of their concerns we collectively compiled in a nation and its territories, and we shared that information with the SEC. The result? That information was included in the final crowdfunding rules. And so I say that to you to say that the ambassador made an important point. And that point was that we need to have our voices heard on this very important issue. And it's not just the issue of remittance, it's the issue of all pay systems as you're doing them in the Caribbean and beyond. And so this is an important conversation. It's not a conversation to be concluded here. It's a conversation to be started. And it's a conversation for you to take it to the streets and make sure that our Congresswoman is supported, to make sure that you're bringing the issue to others, and more importantly, your being here today is a huge accomplishment because you're here because it's important to you. Now we need to make sure everybody else outside these walls understand that it's important to us as well. So I want to thank you for being here, but more importantly, I want to thank my Congresswoman, Yvette D. Clarke, for having this conversation. So I want to open it up. I know we are running short on time, but I do want to see, what questions and concerns you have on your heart about this very important issue. So I want to open it up for a few questions, and I assure you that you have the hardest working Congresswoman in Congress, and your issues and concerns and solutions to this problem will get to the right place. Can I open it up for questions? Oh, that's a first. No questions? Oh, come on.
We work with the U.S. banks to help them strengthen their anti-money laundering and terrorist financing programs. Mm-hmm. So how would a firm like mine, because one of our areas in the region is the Caribbean, Central and South America, we help the banks strengthen their program. But we want to work with the Caribbean nations and the banks down there too. And I saw that as a problem when the banks are making their decisions on what countries and the banks in those countries that they want to not do business with from the correspondent banking relationship. We see that as a problem, but we want to go there to the Caribbean and help them make the banks more comfortable doing business with them, because they don't do it necessarily across the board. It appears that way. There are some special relationships that they continue, and they do look at the bottom line as far as like how much revenue is coming in with the relationship, and they weigh that with the risk. So we kind of like want to help the nations do that. How would a firm like mine get in touch with those nations?
Do you want to, Jared? I'm going to sit down so we can go back and forth.
You are correct about the discriminatory way in which the correspondent banking issue is addressed. Local regional organizations suffer more than larger international organizations. So let's take a large firm like Western Union, who have significant political leverage. They will be able to access banking services. But what happens with many of the smaller banks is that, notwithstanding the fact that they would have had independent reviews by firms qualified and recognized to provide this independent review, oftentimes the situation, it doesn't help. So for instance, I mentioned this close relationship I have with Barclays and many other banks. That doesn't help. The fact that it's independently reviewed, the compliance is up to stuff. The issue you raise about the profitability is one that also needs to be dealt with. In fact, many of the banks say that it's just not profitable enough. The returns are not sufficient for the risk that they're taking. Yet when I say to the bank, tell me what to pay, in other words, I say, okay, you tell me how much you need to earn from this account. In one instance, I said to the bank, you give me, I will give you a retainer, which is a minimum, and then on top of that, we add to ensure that you cover your profit expectations. Well, Mr. Jarrett, no, that's not quite how we do business. So therefore, it goes beyond that. But all signals point back to U.S. Treasury here. And all signals point to the changing of a direction. Now, banking is the most regulated thing that you can do. And going back for many years, banks have always responded to stimulus, positive or negative, from policymakers. Whether it's a decision to improve banking in underserved communities or to expand housing, as the case was in the past. It's always how the regulator points. And so what we need to do is to get the regulators to have a different view, and that view can only but come from the political direction that has happened. But yes, indeed, there are organizations that could need your help. And there is an organization called the Caribbean Association of Banks, who I'd happily share your resume or your business card with to see how you could probably help some of the banks within the region to assess and review their compliance process. I'm a member of that organization. And of course, there's the CARICOM task force, which is looking at the issue, which we can speak to. But it's going to be a multifaceted response. I heard you made reference to fintechs. Here's in Barbados a gentleman by the name of Gabriel Abed, who has set up a company called BIT. Oh, yeah. And BIT has recently received investments, a large investment from a company called Overstock. You all know Overstock.com, Dr. Brin. He has invested in BIT. BIT has lost its banking relationship because it's a fintech company which has been using blockchain technology, which is really one of the tools that they use for Bitcoin, but it's really distributed ledgers. It's really a very secure system. As you know, the United States is now passing regulations to manage it. So he's ahead of the curve in thinking about ways in which to do payments. But at some space, he can't be everywhere in the world. He needs a correspondent bank who will make those payments. Remember earlier I made a point that it's like a chain. Correspondent banking is like a chain of banking relationship. It's my bank to that bank to that bank. So for him to do business in the world, he needs to be on the chain. And so when even though he's in fintech, if he's off the chain, he can't function. If PayPal couldn't get correspondent banking relationships, PayPal wouldn't work. Amazon wouldn't work. And so the issue is to get the decision makers to begin to view the Caribbean as somewhere. And in fact, I must tell you, my travels around, I remember meeting bankers in the UK, and I literally have to point on the map as to where is the Caribbean, you know? So it's really that recognition. And so the point you raise, the point that Congresswoman makes, that the voice is important. Enough voices. Those 4 or 5 million Caribbean people and their children and their grandchildren, and then the friends of those Caribbean people need to all begin to hear the voice as to what's happening. The media needs to pick up on it. We need to push this website, CaribbeanDerisking.com, so people can see what's going on.
Hi, thank you. I'm Dr. Golda Downer, Chair of the Caribbean American Political Action Committee here in Washington. And this is a very interesting and enlightening conversation. One of the things I wanted to say was that as a PAC and groups like ours in this country, we're also able to help assist in not just making our communities aware of the issues, but bringing it to the fore. When some of the ambassadors here in Washington, D.C. came and talked to us about the de-risking, we were able to go to our D.C. City Council because we have a vote, and we found out about it too late, because our vote was one of the votes that actually put it over so that it became law, unfortunately. So I'm going to suggest that we not only do this, but make sure those of us who have a voice and can make a difference be involved in the discussion. I also want to say that I am with the Marcus Garvey organization, and we know who he is. He was one of the forefathers and civil rights leader of this country, and there's a push afoot to get him to get a posthumous exoneration from President President Obama. I have the cards. Thank you.
Justin actually was supposed to speak on that.
He's going to speak on it, but I have the cards. I just want to make sure that we don't run out of time. We have the cards, and we need to get 100,000 signatures. This may be the last time ever that Dr. Garvey, Julius Garvey, gets a chance to see his father exonerated. We need 100,000 signatures, and when people can go in and get 100,000 signatures because they want a dog park, we can do this for our hero.
Well, thank you for that. Happy to see what you're doing. Marcus Garvey is a hero for Jamaica. He was a visionary in his time. He helped to grow this diaspora. He provided great leadership to our African Americans in the 1900s as they began to take command of the political system. So really proud of what you're doing. In relation to the issue of correspondent banking, sorry you were late. But it's a lesson that we should not allow to pass. Most people will think that politics is something for certain people. Everything is political. Politics is about the rules that govern our society, and therefore we need to respect that office and those persons who volunteer to provide service, as the ones we have here, the clerks, but also to bring the issues to the fore and to bring them early and to participate. So let's not be late the next time. Let's be ready.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Mayor Wayne Messam from the city of Miramar, Florida, which is a suburb between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And I'm also a first-generation American whose parents hail from Manchester, Jamaica. All right, so, but the reason why I'm here is that Miramar is the 13th largest city in Florida. It boasts perhaps the 5th largest Jamaican diaspora community in the world. So, along with other Caribbean nations. So obviously we have millions of dollars in remittances, money transfers, transactions to the Caribbean. So as an elected official who has influence, who has the ear of our congressional district, I would like to know, is there a specific congressional push? Are there any efforts from a bill perspective to overwrite the de-risking policy that's now in place that's causing all of these issues? And what can we do at the local level to bring this issue more to the forefront and from an advocacy standpoint, be able to strategically get a clear message to our congressional delegation so that we can get more momentum to get this reversed? Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a very, very good question. Yes, we're in the midst of trying to draft that legislation right now. We have discussed this issue. We're fortunate that the Congressional Black Caucus has about 10 members on the Financial Services Committee in the House of Representatives. We have begun some conversations with Senator Cory Booker on the Senate side. We're trying to do a concerted effort to move the agenda to address the concerns through legislation, but we're also reaching out to the instruments of government on the executive branch side because there's certain things that just need to be mitigated prior to us trying to get something through a crazy Congress. So, you know, stay tuned. It will be, is it Frederica or Alcee? Okay, well, both those members have been briefed to a certain degree. We need to make sure that we do some more sessions with members to get them really focused on this. I have tried to bring sort of an international perspective to the work of the Congressional Black Caucus, given my affiliations. And we're in the space where people are really beginning to understand the implications of what is taking place right now and the urgency of the matter. So thank you for raising that.
Do we have time for one more question or?
It's 12.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm gonna have Justin wants to come up and talk to us about the program regarding exoneration of Marcus Garvey.